Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a movie review. And this movie has been an anticipated film for me to watch since I heard of its announcement back in 2021. And we thought we were going to get it in 2022, but it got pushed back and finally released in the year 2023. And the film is called Zombie Town. Now, Zombie Town getting a film adaptation, yes, in case you didn't know, this movie is an adaptation, or at least taking inspiration from one of the 6 R.L. Stine novellas under the same name, Zombie Town. Now, the novella originally came out in the year, I think, 2000 or 2001, and then years later was reprinted under Amazon with Two Lions Publications. And there were some tweaks to the book from my knowledge. I don't have the original copy on hand because I just don't have it for my collection yet. I do have the Amazon version here. But I've already covered these books, the 6 novellas, on the channel. If you want to check out those reviews and my thoughts on them, you can check them out if you like. I thought that this book in particular was actually supposed to be a short story at some point. It doesn't feel like a full book. And I strongly believe it has ties to Goosebumps with a canceled book called Triple Header Book 3. And I've mentioned that a couple times on the channel, and I still believe that. So it getting a movie adaptation kind of opened my eyes to more R.L. Stine kids' horror stories that aren't in Goosebumps or Nightmare Room or The Haunting Hour getting some attention. And when I saw big names like Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase were going to be on it, I was like, well, let's see where they're going to take this movie, because I don't remember any adult characters in the story that resemble how old these people are in this movie. And after watching this, it's kind of sad for me, because Zombie Town was easily my favorite of the novellas when I read through them. And this movie feels like a downgrade in a lot of ways, but also some upgrades to the former short story, kind of breathing some life into it, making it more full and giving some ideas of what a full book of the concept could have looked like. Unfortunately for me, the movie has a lot of problems. If you look at the ratings and the critics' opinions on this film online, people are beating this film over the head pretty unfairly, I feel. Is it a terrible movie? No. Does it have bad quality? Sure. But I think this is probably a middle-of-the-pack R.L. Stine film. I don't hate it or anything. I also don't love it. And I'll explain why near the end of this review for this film. But if you're a fan of R.L. Stine and you love his kids' horror stories and all that, y'all should go check this out. And I think that this could be a good leap to have more kids' horror films out there with R.L. Stine stories, to kind of, give us something to look forward to in the years to come. And I hope that they do more and use this movie as a template of things they can tweak to make the future movies work better. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So the movie begins on a kind of a stinger open where you get some cool visuals of like an old grindhouse type of zombie film, and you see this chase sequence of these teenagers going through like a graveyard or some wooded area, and it's being meta with itself pretty off the bat. And it leads into some news coverage of a brand new movie that's coming out. And the footage that we were watching in the beginning of the movie goes to this director played by Dan Aykroyd, known as Mr. I think his name Carver. And Mr. Carver is not in Zombie Town's short story, just so y'all know. And he hasn't put out a movie since like I think the early 90s. And now, since the town of Carverville, which is actually named after him because he's brought some fame and some notoriety to the area that they're from, because he has so many rabid fans of zombie films and all of his work, he's decided to put out one last movie just for them. And he's going to be airing the special movie at this locally owned cinema house type of place. And the owner is played by Henry Czerny. And we then get to meet the two main characters of the film, who are Mike and Amy, and they're on a phone call. Mike is played by Marlon Kazadi, and Amy's played by Maddie Monroe. And they're in high school, which is a contrast to the setup of the short story, who are middle schoolers just looking to go see a film. Mike happens to work at the movie theater that this film is going to be airing, and he might have a crush on this girl named Amy, but he's kind of holding back his feelings, trying to play the cool guy card, not trying to come off too strong. And she says that she's going to be going to a Halloween party, because it's around Halloween in the story, with this guy that she's interested in at his place, while Mike has to go work this event. So we catch up to, I'm gonna skim over some things that aren't really important here. So we catch up to the Mr. Carver guy bringing his film up to the theater house, and Mr. Carver, when he's there, he's looking at these posters on the wall of the theater, which are basically just a wall, shrine to all of his movies. And you can tell that he's kind of apprehensive with the fans and the rabid fandom, and the movie kind of comes to commentate on that later on. But he has a change of heart, and when he sees the poster, I think of the film that we saw in the cold open, which features Chevy Chase, I should have mentioned that, he kind of falls faint. And he has this symbol around his neck that was also featured in the movie as well. And the canister that the film that he brought in has this, it's like an Egyptian symbol or something. It's kind of hard to explain. But he falls faint and he gets taken off in an ambulance. And just so happens the event's going to be canceled. But Mike, trying to be the cool guy, knows that his friend Amy loves this Mr. Carver guy's films. So he decides to kind of put on a private show for her to get her to not go to this guy's party. And she's like, okay, I guess we can do that before I go. That'll be cool. We're friends. And, I've already skipped over a couple of, quite a few minutes of building here, but you get a sense of Mike's character early on. He's kind of a quiet kid. He likes to bike around. He goes to this bike shop, who the guy's kind of a jerk to him. He encounters some bullies in high school, right? And those bullies might actually be associated with some people that Amy's interested in. And there's a teacher called Mrs. Bernard, but her name is spelt like Boneyard, and that's what they call her. And they have some weird interactions with her. So this kind of all plays into, I guess, Mike's stopping to care to throw on a private show, even though it's advised to him that they don't air the movie at all. So Mike makes a very poor decision by having Amy come to the theater. He makes some snacks for them, and he puts the movie on the projector, puts the reel in. This is like an old-fashioned projector, mind you. It's not like the new modern ones with laser download movies and stuff like that. I work at a movie theater. I know what that stuff is. But this one is like old school film reel, right? And they put the movie on, and they're like, oh, this must be like an alternate cut or something. But it ends up being just a bright white light, and nothing is happening, right? Meanwhile, a cop off in the distance that shortly meets a pretty grisly demise notices an explosion going on near the movie theater. And the kids hear this, and they go to try to shut the movie off, but they realize something is really wrong. So they go outside to see what the commotion was. And they realize that the town may or may not have been turned into zombies. Now, these zombies aren't your traditional zombies. They are kind of powered by, I guess, this Egyptian symbol that's on, Carver's neck on a necklace, and it's also on the film canister reel. And they realize that might have some protection because it gave protection of some survivors in the first film of Carver's that brought him fame. So they realize that the symbol's on the canister. They go and grab the canisters to get some sort of protection. And they go around, I think, back to their homes to see if their loved ones have been affected. And they sure enough have. And meanwhile, Mr. Carver, he wakes up in an ambulance and he hasn't been affected because he's wearing the symbol, or at least was in the vicinity of the symbol. And the the theater owner guy happened to be riding in the ambulance with him. He got turned into a zombie, but because he has a symbol, he can kind of like make the zombies do whatever he says. So they head back to Carver's place. And after, Mike and Amy go to their place, they realize that maybe they should go ask Carver and see if he's still around and try to figure out how to solve this zombie issue, this zombie outbreak. And they end up at Carver's house, and Carver pretty much explains the source behind these movies and how he's able to do it and his motives of making this new film. And I don't want to spoil it because it spoils pretty much the back half of the movie and the climax. But let's just say the kids and Carver have to agree to attempt to stop this, and they find a way to stop it that may or may not involve destroying the master copies of his original films, including the newest one. And they may or may not succeed in it, and you may or may not get a happy ending for Amy and Mike, and maybe they might end up together. And I'm also skipping over some scenes, some antic scenes where they go around, the town. They end up going to like Amy's crushes or former crushes party to crash it to see if they can get anything they need for what they need to do. There's also some conflict I skipped over with Mike wanting to potentially keep the town as zombies because he doesn't like his bullies. He doesn't pretty much like living there. But you get some character growth with him trying to, find something in the story, when he's going through this ordeal that makes him realize that he does care about this town in some way. I skipped over a lot of that, but you'll see that in the film. And then you get a meta ending, which is kind of cool, I guess, for what it is. And that's what you're going to expect out of the Zombie Town film. Now, off the bat, this film, I should say this had a PG-13 rating, and you could have fooled me, because the only things about this movie that I think are PG-13 quality are the designs of the zombies, which are actually quite creepy. In some of those grindhouse scenes that you see in the movie where they cut away to these zombie films, they do have some darker implications that might be kind of frightening for maybe a kid under the age of 10. And there is some cursing in this movie, which I was kind of taken back by. I'm like, okay. But the fact that the writers, who are mainly Michael Schwartz, Peter Lepanotis, and Michael Samanek, who I think Michael Samanek wrote the original draft, and the other two writers came on after the fact and kind of tweaked it and added a bunch of new stuff to it that became this film. You can definitely tell that the writers were trying to make this story more whole and more mature. And that's pretty much my first positive. And I didn't really think of it as a positive until my good friend Spongy444 linked me a Twitter feed of an interview with Michael Schwartz. And Michael pretty much surmised that, the original script written by Michael Samanek was just sitting around kind of collecting dust. I guess it got optioned, picked up by Trimuse Entertainment, who actually produced and funded the film here. They had the script, but they wanted more to it. So these two guys, Michael Schwartz and Peter Lepanitis, or whatever, I'm sorry if I'm butchering his name, came on to the movie, and they tried to keep as much of the book as possible, but also adding some stuff in there to make it more full. And I can appreciate that, because I think a lot of things they added in this movie was refreshing, like adding pretty much the core cast. Like Amy wasn't in the book. Her name was Karen, and she definitely did not have the same angle with Mike as she does in the short story book as well. You have more of a love story thing with high schoolers here, which isn't too bad of a thing here, but it does have some moments involving that, and some actual side moments with the characters where they see some growth in the story, which is really nice to see. Mr. Carver, played by Dan Aykroyd, was probably one of the better characters of the film. And he has a very complex character to him. He's obviously evil and unlikable, and he has that way about him, but he does, for a change, you get a sense that the villain is coming full circle of the story, which is kind of cool. And you wouldn't think that. And even though Chevy Chase is on the cover here, his character Mesmerian, when he's in the movie, he's kind of fun to see him. You know, it's old Chevy Chase, of course. He's not the same as he used to be. But yeah, it was nice to see him here, even though they definitely did not use him in the movie as much as this poster or his name in the title card would suggest. And I do like the setting of the movie theater here. I think the acting performances, for the most part, was actually serviceable and pretty good in a lot of ways. There's only a couple of dud side characters that are kind of weak. Like there's these 3 idiot characters outside the theater in the movie that are kind of weak acting. And then the guy who plays the theater owner, Henry Czerny, oh my lord. His acting when he's playing a zombie is pretty cringe. The same thing goes to how the zombies operate in the film as well, but I'll get into that in the negatives. But the acting was pretty solid. The atmosphere for the budget they had was really cool. Carversville, you get the sense that everybody's in love with this guy Carver's movies. There's just something about it. It does have this weird charm to it. Even like some side ancillary characters like Mrs. Bonard, or Boneyard as they call her. She has some funny moments in the movie as well. And in the heart of it, you do get like this cheesy DCOM feeling version of the book, which definitely is a downgrade for me, but I don't know, it feels wholesome enough to not outright hate it, and I quite enjoy it for that. Is this going to be a watch every single Halloween or every single year? Probably not. Is this a must-watch R.L. Stine film for most people out there? No, but I enjoyed a lot about it. Now, I will say some negatives, because there are a lot here. For the budget they had, it was serviceable. But to me, the budget also did not fare well in a couple of areas. It wasn't the effects, it wasn't the practical, the zombie things or any of that weighed it down. It's just, the movie kind of lacks a scope. Like, this town feels almost too small town, given the size and what we understand about it. There's just not a lot of supporting cast in this movie, and it makes it feel kind of hollow and empty, which is, off the bat, the most noticeable thing I could say about it. You can definitely tell they didn't have a lot of extras to work with, unfortunately. And it didn't really sell me on that zombie town vibe. The second negative, okay, now we're getting into the cringe, is the zombies, okay? It's not this, we're going back to positives with this. I like the concept that the writers brought to this movie that's not in the book, with having like an ancient Egyptian curse causing zombies, and these zombies, the way they operate is very different. I guess I can mention it here. They take hold of you, and they shine a light into your soul, and they suck your soul out, and then you become a zombie, right? And that's how they infect you. Instead of biting, instead of ripping you to shreds like normal zombies, that's how you become one in the story. I kind of like that for a kid-friendly zombie tale. However, the zombies in this movie are absolutely cringe. They're played for comedic relief, and they have pretty much zero threat level in the whole story. There's quite literally plot armor that these characters have that make them immune to zombies. So you don't really feel like they're in much threat or anything. The only threat you feel is them trying to save the town, which I guess is a cool way to angle it. But in terms of believability or trying to understand how these characters are feeling, you never really feel that they're in any real sense of danger. So it kind of takes me out of the experience and doesn't really make it scary. And not saying that kids can't find this approach scary, but I have a hard time believing that most kids would actually find this scary, which is an unfortunate thing in a kid-friendly zombie movie, especially when comparing it to the book or the short story that was mostly serious toned and dark with a meta flair to it. There's some really grisly scenes, and there's also some scenes that cut off before it goes too far, but this book was dark, and this movie is just not that. It's a little too kid-friendly, okay? My third negative with the film Oh my lord. Oh, is making the kids high schoolers. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Taking a kid's horror story and making them more mature might help with child labor laws. It might help the production company avoiding red tape with that. It uh, might help the cringe cutesy factor that younger actors tend to bring to sets, making them young adults like around 18 or 19. They can work how many hours they want. They're more trained acting and all that. But the cost of this is when you make them high schoolers, you got to go down the high school drama route where they have some relationship quarrels and stuff like that. And we're just getting into textbook stuff that is just not in kids' horror, which is unfortunate, right? It's like I don't come to these movies, especially a movie based on this book, to watch high schoolers and have them go through a romantic coming of age connection. That's not what I wanted to see out of this film, unfortunately, but it's what we got. And kind of similarly to the Goosebumps 2023 show, it takes me out of it a little bit. And the last thing that I have a negative with, of course, when we're dealing with the story, right? I can't help but think that a lot of this, I should maybe paraphrase it like this. A lot of this movie comes off redundant because of a certain character's actions, primarily Mr. Carver. He made this movie, has a change of heart, right? He has a change of heart, doesn't want to play it, right? And then once this zombie outbreak happens, he has this monologue where he acts like he's happy and then he's upset about it. And he goes through these four points of the story where he's kind of going back and forth like, oh, well, all my fans are mindless zombies. They don't really care to know me. They just want more of what I make. And I'll give it to them. I'll put them in what I make live in color. I get the commentary, and the commentary is quite smart. But his character is just confusing. I don't really get a full sense of Carver's full motives. And even though they're kind of laid out and it's done in a way to where he can have some character development, I still feel like the believability in some of this stuff, trying to force in that commentary, but then also try to force in he's a flawed human, he needs to learn his lesson kind of thing. Some things just don't add up. And I'm not going to get into too many specifics because I'll be definitely spoiling a good amount of the movie if I go any further. But yeah, his character was kind of frustrating. And yeah, Mike and Amy, they're kind of textbook characters. There's not a lot to them. Except Mike works at a movie theater. He's into movies. He's a good, technician and all that. That's kind of cool. Amy just seems like an average girl. They don't really have much character to work with. Even though there's more to chew on with them than the short story, just not a lot. So all in all, Zombie Town, the film here, I think this is a good jumping off point. If Tri-Muse Entertainment or maybe Parachute Press or the remnants of Parachute Press, like Joan Moricha, Jane Stine, R.L. Stine, if they want to take some other stories that aren't in Goosebumps, that aren't in Haunting Hour, that aren't in The Nightmare Room, or mostly Ghostly, just beyond, mainline series, and just put some of these standalone stories out there in film, they could easily learn from the mistakes of this. And I think the biggest thing I can say about this is a missed opportunity on making a dark tale for kids. They went a little too family friendly. The writers here, I think, did a good job adding in some things that weren't in the short story that I kind of wish are in there now. But then again, the changes you made softened up the blow that we got in the short story and just made it a little more cringe. Moving forward, I do think that stories like The Creatures from Beyond, or maybe some older ones like Zoomers from R.L. Stine will make good films to have in this new repertoire or lineup of films based on R.L. Stine stories. And even the cover of this says, "From the R.L. Stine universe," down here at the bottom, We can have an R.L. Stine cinematic universe that's not big franchises. You can have these little standalone films, but just some advice, I'm just some channel. If you're out there watching producers or, people looking at scripts out there of R.L. Stine's books that are available to make, lean more into the horror, and stop doing the teenage relationship stuff, stop doing the corny joke stuff, or I guess, nerfing the source material, and just let it breathe. If you're going to make a PG-13 movie, make it PG-13. Just don't just put out a movie with some mild cursing and some edgy effects and get a PG-13 rating because you weren't intending to do it. Make a PG-13 film. I think you'd be fine. I think R.L. Stine stories actually serve best with that rating, if I'm being honest. But like I said, there's actually some scripts out there of some other stories, like It's the First Day of School Forever. Apparently, there's been a script that hasn't had anything done with it. That could be made. I've already thrown out, Zoomers, The Creatures from Beyond. I hope to see more. I really do, and I hope that they are better than this in the future. And I also hope that some other unmade scripts out there, like Monsterville 2, The Haunted Getaway, end up getting a film. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, and that's another topic for another day. But all in all, Zombie Town, Tri-Muse Entertainment's first foray into R.L. Stine's books. Do I want to see another R.L. Stine book with this label? Sure, why not? It's probably going to be low budget anyway on a streaming network. And if they go into like a Disney or Netflix, they'll probably get butchered even further than what this did. So, yeah, why not? I want to see more, but it's definitely a heavily flawed film. Definitely heavily flawed. I don't think it's quite good, like a 3.5 or higher, if I'm being honest. It's not quite a C tier film for me. It's still a D tier because there's still just not a lot there. It's not that entertaining. All these negatives I have with it are kind of small, medium-ish things that just add up, like 0.4 increment deductions. But I thought on it. I was originally going to give it way lower, but I decided on a high D tier, which is like a 3 to a 3.4. And I settled on, I think, a 3.3 out of 5 stars. It's an okay film. Or kind of meh, kind of not good, not bad, fine. It's all of those adjectives all in one. Is it the worst R.L. Stine movie I've seen? No. Is it the best? Nowhere near it. But does it have charm? Yeah. I mean, go try this movie for yourself. I know a lot of people are probably going to have the reaction that critics have. Oh, this movie's bad because it's not scary. It's too family friendly. It's kind of cringe. Trust me, I get it. But there is a lot of substance there peeling back underneath those things. And there's some fun ideas. And I do think that this film does deserve a little more credit than it's being given. But it's still not the best thing ever. And don't twist my words, but I'm just saying, give this a fair shake, okay? So yeah, that's my thoughts on Zombie Town's film. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this movie. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.